Greetings to each of you, and welcome back to another episode of Heart-Centered Wellness here with Dr. Shay. This month, AprilMe, we are focusing on emotional health, and today we are going to be looking at 5 ways to improve our emotional intelligence. Remember that emotional intelligence is all about knowing and navigating our emotions. Understanding that emotions and feelings are different and serve different purposes, but then embracing the fact that we have been given a divine gift, and that is the gift of choice, and we can choose how we understand, navigate, and respond to the varying emotions as they show up within us. So 5 ways to improve our emotional intelligence. We're going to start with number 1, learn your emotions. You need to take the time to learn your emotions and become comfortable acknowledging your emotions. You need to learn how to appraise how you are feeling. What is your body saying? How is your mind interpreting these bodily sensations? And how can we create a safe space where the mind and the body can, from a space of safety, decide how we are going to proceed forward or what decision we are going to make in this particular situation or scenario? We need to think about what triggered this emotion. Is this emotion realistic as to what is happening in the present? Or has the feeling or perception gone back to the past and pulled some similar feelings and narratives and brought them into the present? So the first thing we have to do as we are learning to enhance our emotional intelligence is we have to learn our emotions. And oftentimes that is directly connected to understanding our triggers or activating events. The second way that we're going to improve our emotional intelligence, and I alluded to a little bit of it in the first, we're going to talk about it more in depth here, is adapting our responses. I want you to know that there is a difference between responding and reactivity. Reactivity really emanates from the hypothalamus and the amygdala, the fight, flight, or freeze area of our brain, where we're in crisis mode and we are sensing some form of a threat. And so ultimately we are going to react, and in the space of reactivity, we are pulling from old ways of being, old strategies, old coping mechanisms that may not always serve us in the moment. But responding is different. Responding is intentional. Responding allows us to exercise the power of our choice. And responding comes from a more conscious place versus a subconscious place. Whereas we understand that we are triggered, we understand that our body and our mind is attempting to communicate that there is something around us that is impacting our physical, spiritual, mental, or emotional safety, and a response is needed. And so we must learn then to pause when we feel these emotions arise. Give ourselves the time to explore the narrative. What is this narrative telling us about the moment? What are we discerning? What perceptions do we have? What is the sensor saying in this moment? How is our being in the moment that this is happening? And when we can pause to self-reflect, then we can assign meaning to the moment. We can determine whether this moment is safe, this interaction is safe, this person is safe, right, or unsafe. And this allows us to rewrite the narratives in our mind that may have in the past been slightly confused because of trauma or other adverse circumstances that we have encountered. And so once we then pause and take a moment to allow our emotions to arise and consider them, then we can decide in that moment which choice we desire to make, which is what we're going to be discussing in tip number 3. Tip number 3 is requesting feedback. We all need to have a trusted support network around us that can help us in a moment of indecision or emotional charge. Often what happens is an individual will experience an emotion, a feeling will then manifest that is attached to a narrative, and then reactivity follows. But when we can press pause in those moments, and even if in the moment we still feel the emotional charge and we don't trust that how we choose to respond in the moment is a response and it's still more reactivity, then we can reach out to those that we trust for wise counsel. That wise counsel will help us to understand from multiple perspectives if the chosen response is appropriate for the situation. You can use a little bit of negative visualization and play the tape forward to see, okay, if I respond this way, what is going to be the outcome? And is that outcome the intended outcome? Or is it going to trigger additional conflict? So make sure that you know your support network. Know who will provide you wise counsel, who will be able to de-escalate you and help you to see the present situation from a different paradigm. Make sure you have individuals around you who are not afraid to challenge your reactivity, who are not afraid to put another lens in your glasses so that you can see the world from a balanced perspective. So if you don't have individuals in your environment or around you that you can call to request that feedback, I challenge you as one of the tools for your emotional health to get you a tribe who can provide you that feedback when you need it most. Tip number 4 is to consume varied content. One of the things that happens, especially when we are stuck in the space of emotional charge, is that we cannot see beyond the present circumstances. We can adopt a very victimized mindset, which can then lead us to these spaces of pessimism or we feel hopeless. But when we can consume varied content, for example, our favorite YouTubers, shows, or we can step beyond our everyday life in a vacation or hanging out with pleasurable family and friends, we're reminded that whatever triggered the emotion that is leading to the skewed feeling or perception, there is life beyond that. It's only a moment. So consuming the varied content helps us to move beyond the moment, to know that there's so much life left that's worth living. And so that if we can then see something different than what our present circumstance is communicating to us, it helps us to refuel. It helps us to become more revitalized mentally, cognitively, and that can de-escalate our emotions. And our last strategy is learn to listen. One of the things that we will find if we're radically honest, is that some of the things that trigger emotions within us are less about what was said and more about our interpretation of it. And our interpretation is impacted, our perception is impacted when we listen to respond instead of listening to understand. So when we're in spaces of communication, we need to make sure that we're actively listening. And actively listening means that we are wholly present. We are focused on not only the verbalized language, but also the nonverbal body language. We have to be in a space where we can discern and assess the motive and the heart of the individual, because sometimes our messaging can be slightly off. However, oftentimes we're reacting more to what we thought was said versus what was really being communicated in the moment. And so we must learn to listen in these spaces. We must learn to listen actively, wholly, because when we fully are engaged in the listening process, then we can ask questions that will bring clarity to the areas where there may be a misunderstanding. But when we're listening only to react, we find that we're reacting to half of what was said, or we are interrupting so we don't give the individual the entire time to express their thought, feelings, motives, or intentions. So let's learn to listen more effectively so that maybe we won't become triggered at all. Or at least if we find ourselves having an emotional reaction, we are able to work through that in the moment with the person who's in front of us, so that when we walk away from each other, we're walking away with a deeper understanding, we're walking away in love, or if all else fails, we're walking away with an agreement to disagree. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Heart-Centered Wellness, where we're exploring all things emotional intelligence. I hope that you will join us again next week as we continue to explore our own emotional intelligence. We're going to be looking at some assessments of the emotional quotient next week so that we can become a better me, right? AprilMe is all about emotional health. Remember, you've been given a divine gift, and that gift is the gift of choice. This month, we are choosing emotional health.